Afternoon, everyone. So I'm Simon Wingate. I'm the Channel Director at Read.co.uk, which essentially means that I'm responsible for our proposition for direct employers. I'm going to be talking you through the results of a survey that we did over the first quarter of this year, really to get a better understanding about people's engagement, enjoyment, and ultimately happiness in their work. So hopefully there's some exciting tips that you guys can take back to work today. First of all, the obligatory background into who we are. We are Read.co.uk, but this is the first office of Reed, the recruitment agency business that was launched or opened in May 1960 in Hounslow, for those of you who live in West London. And for the first kind of 30-odd years of its existence, Reed was a high street recruitment agency business and became one of the most recognisable brands in recruitment in the UK. And over a period of time, it developed and it launched a website, which was this beautiful looking thing in 1995, and thankfully the internet has moved on a little bit. But Reed was the first recruitment agency in the world to launch a job site. And this originally was the place where Reed would advertise its jobs to the few candidates that were at that point going online to look for jobs. And for the first kind of 5 years, it was just for Reed. We then opened up free recruitment where lots of other people could advertise jobs. And things have moved on, and this is what the site looks like now. So we're the most recognisable recruitment brand in the UK. We are a completely separate business from the Reed recruitment agency business now, but we had a conversation earlier about how one brand is synonymous with the other, but Reed.co.uk are a separate company. Anyway, that's the boring bit. That's who we are. What I really want to talk to you about, as I said earlier on, is the results of the survey, which was a survey that we ran with just over 2,000 job seekers. But these are not Read.co.uk job seekers. These are people who we employed as an external agency to make sure we could cast our net a bit wider. But 2,000 odd people who are in work at the moment. So just some numbers to provide context. So there's 31.8 million people in work who are working an average of 37.6 hours per week. So obviously some are full-time, some are part-time. But this is kind of the stats that these 2,000 odd job seekers said. And a colleague of mine did some maths earlier on, which is about 58 billion working hours in the UK per year. So that's quite a lot of money that we're investing in 58 billion hours per year in terms of the amount of work. So it's important for us to understand whether people are actually happy at work doing the job that they're doing. So what we asked was, firstly, we asked one question to this audience: are you in your dream job? Now, I know there's one person in the room because I've asked this question at another event, but can I just get a show of hands? Who's in their dream job at the moment? Okay, we're obviously a miserable bunch. But actually, that's not actually too bad. That's not actually too bad. So we asked this audience of job seekers whether they were in their dream job, and the answer was that 21% of employees thought that they were currently in their dream job. Now, I'm not. I wanted to be a professional sportsman, but my inability to be any good at sport meant that was never going to happen. So I'm pretty pleased with the lot that I've got, if anyone from Read.co.uk is listening. But yeah, 21% of people said that they were in their dream job. And then if you break that down almost by job role to see the people who think that they're in their dream job, 15% of the people who said they are in what they refer to as entry-level jobs. So this is different to graduate jobs. Okay, so these are entry-level roles that people who are not necessarily graduates. The middle group here, 26%, is people who are in what they defined as graduate roles. They believe they're in their dream job. And then at the other end, 46% of directors believe they're in their dream job. Now, what the other 54% are doing, I don't know. But what we know is that we've got from one end, very senior people in organisations, at the other end, very junior people in organisations. But ultimately, we have a bit of a spread here. But what it tells us is that not everyone is 100% satisfied in the job that they're doing. In fact, 56% of people said that they were satisfied in their job. If we look at it by sector, again, of the people who said they were in their dream job, 30% of them were working in property and construction, and then media and leisure and tourism. There was pretty much a small group in the other. Those mathematicians amongst you will be able to work. There's not a lot left. But actually what it sort of talks about a little bit is that, for example, something like leisure and tourism, if you're getting to go around the world and see amazing places that you would not necessarily see in your normal day-to-day life, I guess it stands to reason that you're pretty happy in what you're doing. But what it does show is that different people in different sectors respond differently to different things with regards to their jobs. Then if you look at the age range, something really interesting. So Potentially, what it means is that, people on the left-hand side here, the younger generation, start with a load of youthful exuberance in the job, and then when they realise that the world of work isn't as exciting as they thought it might be, then maybe their interest wanes a little bit. But then over time, when people are spending more and more time really understanding what they want to get out of a job and have the opportunity to move between roles or progress within an organisation or change employers, we see that there's certainly an increase on the right-hand side here. So I guess maybe the more experience that you get means that you're either in your dream job or maybe you're a bit more realistic about what your dream job actually is. But I think it's interesting to see that based on age demographics, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a bit, could determine someone's happiness or enjoyment and engagement in their role. So we asked the question, as you know, 21% said they thought they were in the job, but over half of people said, look, it just doesn't exist. 54% of people said that there was no such thing as their dream job. So again, maybe we're sort of reluctant to dream, perhaps, I don't know, but or people are just accepting of the fact that in reality you do a job to pay the bills, to go on nice holidays or whatever else it might be, or some of the things that I'll talk about a bit later on. But potentially over half people think a dream job is a bit of a misnomer anyway. So, one of the other things we looked at was throughout your working week, so this 58 billion hours that you're at work, what percentage of the time that you're at work are people happy? And this 2,000 job seekers said that they were happy at work 57% of the time in their current role. Okay, so working from Monday through to Friday, it might be that just before they get to lunch, they realise they're over that hump, and now it's downhill towards the weekend, so the second half of the week is the bit they're really excited about. Or it might be that Monday morning they have a particularly difficult meeting, so that's part of the 43% that they're not happy. Who knows? But what it shows is there's an awful lot of time that people have spent at work. They are not happy. So, who are the people who said they were happy? Well, first, if we look at sector by sector, the most happy people, or the people who spent most of their time happy, on the left-hand side here, are the people who are in property and construction. Now, again, there might be something in there. If you got, I'm sure if you ask them during the summer when the sun's out, they'd probably be happier than if you ask them in the winter when it's pouring down with rain. But there's something in the fact that in property and construction, particularly, there's always lots going on, lots of building work, lots of investment, whether it's Crossrail or other big projects. There's lots of work going on here, so maybe the fact that work is plentiful might have something to do with this. But I think more so on the right-hand side here, or the middle and the right-hand side, science and pharmaceutical and education and teaching are areas of work where the majority of people who are working in these spaces will have invested a lot of time, energy, and financial resource to dedicate their lives to a career which they feel is worthwhile or they can really invest in personally. So I'm sure there is something in here about the fact that if you're a doctor, okay, as an example, you've got to spend quite a lot of time in education to become a doctor. So you would hope that by the time you get there, that you're doing something that you really love, that you feel is worthwhile, that can make a big difference. So what I would potentially say, therefore, is that if you're working in one of these industries which is directly linked to an educational background, there's a high likelihood of someone doing something worthwhile and therefore feeling happier. Conversely, on the other side, the miserable bunch are retail, energy, and sales were the three sectors which indexed least highly. I was going to say lowly, but I'm not sure that's a word. Least highly. So retail, energy, and sales. Now, I guess retail and sales, I guess there's a number of ways that you could look at this. And actually, it might be understandable that people aren't necessarily happy or as happy as certain other industry sectors. If you think of the nature of retail or sales environments, fast-paced, high energy, high expectations, target-driven. If you're working in a store, you're on your feet all day, dealing with some good customers, but you might also deal with difficult customers. So there's lots of different challenges in these roles. But I guess in something like sales, potentially, the pressure of understanding the numbers telling you whether you're performing or not performing might have something to do with why sales is relatively low scoring in terms of happiness. So that's some of the sector-by-sector detail. Interesting enough, recruitment professionals, which does include in-house recruiters, were happy 55.2% of the time. So I don't know whether I guess that's the most of the audience that are in the room now, whether that resonates with you guys. I'm sure you're much happier than the rest of the group. But anyway, an interesting stat. So we then asked them, if you wanted to be happier in your job, what would help? So 57.9% of employees said that their job would be changed, but just by a few, would be improved rather, just by a few changes. So this is not additional perks or benefits. I'll talk about that a bit later, but these are just different enhancements that you can make in people's day-to-day lives, which would make them happier. Unsurprisingly, pay is the one that comes out most highly here. So if we pay people more, is there a correlation between pay and happiness? Who knows? It certainly takes some of the pressure off outside, but this is one of the things that, or the top scoring thing that people said would be, could be changed. The next is flexible working. I think greater recognition being at number 3 for me is a really interesting one. It costs nothing to say well done to someone in their work. But actually, the fact that it ranks so highly would suggest that a lot of people who we surveyed maybe don't get that pat on the back, that well done, that bit of recognition for going above and beyond and doing something really good at work. Again, more pay, there is an investment in the bottom line there, but for greater recognition, I think we could all go back to work and tell someone they've done a really good job. So for me, I think that's a really interesting takeaway. Greater holiday allowance is another one, and bonus systems. So these are kind of the 5 things that people said would make them happier. But for me, I think the easiest one that we can all go back to the office today, in effect, is probably number 3. So again, just looking at those first couple, so pay. Who said they wanted more pay? There's a kind of an interesting dynamic going on here, that junior staff and apprentices are both on the top 5, and directors as well. So the people who are most senior and responsible for people's pay want to get paid more themselves. It's an interesting one. But these are the groups who said that pay was most important to them. And I think certainly in terms of junior staff and apprentices, as an example, pay kind of stands to reason there a little bit. If you're kind of entering the workforce, if we assume that we're talking about younger apprentices here, obviously the levy and the new legislation will change things there, but if we're thinking about junior staff, if they live in central London, they need to earn a decent wage in order to be able to have a life outside of work. So I think it's important just to think that different people we know are motivated by different things. But pay is one which certainly resonated highly with these groups. In terms of flexible working, people who worked in a media environment were the most keen to see that changed. Then accountancy, sales, IT, and sales, science and pharmaceutical. So again, these were the top 5 scoring industries in terms of flexible working. And recognition, a really interesting one actually. That I'll talk a bit more about Gen Z and some of the other findings from the research. We talk a lot about how the younger age group need more out of their employer than other groups. But I think the Gen Y 20 to 36 age group are the ones who say that they need recognition more than anyone. So that might be that they've been in work for a period of time and they simply haven't got recognition and they're still craving it. Or it might just be something because people perceive them as being more experienced, their managers don't think they need the level of recognition that a younger audience might do. So I'm sure there's people in various different degrees in your organisations here, but again, something to just show that actually, irrespective of the age of the demographic that you're working with, recognition is really important. Okay, and then we talked about perks. So these are things which are, I guess, benefits. What are the benefits and perks that people value the most? So the first, perhaps unsurprisingly, was work-life balance. So this is around candidates saying that they wanted their employees to understand that there is life outside of work. I think in France they've gone to the nth degree here to allow people legally to switch themselves off outside work. Now, I know my wife, I was going to say moans, wrong terminology, at me of an evening when I'm on my phone checking my emails or I've got my laptop out or whatever else. And so I understand from her point of view, she tells me I don't have a very good work-life balance. But actually, this is really important. So we, certainly a lot of us, expect people who are working for or with us to be connected to work all of the time. But what we're saying here is that the employees that we surveyed are saying that their employer recognising that there is life outside of work is the thing that is most important to them. And actually, if you then look at the sectors, marketing, advertising and PR, social care and recruitment, interesting enough, and HR, are the top 3 sectors where they said that having a good work-life balance was most important to them, was the key perk that their employers could provide for them. Number 2 was an excellent pension scheme, which is an interesting one. And actually, perhaps unsurprisingly, this indexed more highly in terms of importance with a slightly older demographic. So for the kind of 18 to 20s, this wasn't necessarily something that's important, but certainly for the older generations that we were talking to, this was really important. And actually, in terms of sectors, science and pharmaceutical, healthcare, and teaching and education were the three sectors that said that a really good pension scheme was really important to them. Again, some of this might be that if we include kind of teaching and education around public sector and healthcare, you might include the NHS, for example, in that. If they've kind of been in an organisation for a while and they have a decent pension, for example, then obviously losing that pension is something which is going to be very disruptive for them. But these were the three sectors that this was most important for. Next is flexible working hours. And this isn't that they want to work less. Okay, so this isn't people want to shirk. That's not what the purpose of this was. This was people saying that actually they want to be able to, I guess it links directly with that work-life balance thing. They want to be able to start a bit later and leave a bit earlier if something outside work is happening, or they want to maybe shorten their lunch hour to get a bit more freedom outside. We have it at read.co.uk. I'm sure a lot of you have that. If you want a slightly longer lunch, you can take a slightly longer lunch. We trust people to do the hours that we expect them to do. You know, we're treating them like grown-ups. But I think this is a really important one. Flexible working, again, depending on what your core working hours is, might not cost your organisations much money at all, but it's something which was incredibly important to the groups that we spoke to. The groups it was important to, for example, are quite interesting. So admin and secretarial, property and construction, research, analysis, and data science. So I guess on the third one here, research, analysis, data science, it might be that if you're spending all of your time looking at numbers, analysing data, that actually the opportunity to, you might be there for ages working on a particular project very late one night. Actually, the opportunity to come in a bit later the following day doesn't seem unreasonable. So next is a boss who understands that family comes first. So again, not too dissimilar from the work-life balance bit, but this is really people understanding that people have families, that at times you will need to drop your children at school or leave early to pick them up, or if one of your children is ill, that understanding from people that I might need to take the day off work today because my son or daughter is unwell. Interesting enough, there was a fact on here that 17% said that they wanted a boss who enjoys going for a pint. I don't know what that tells us. I know people who I've been responsible for who probably would, the last thing they'd want to do is go out for a pint with me, but that probably tells you more about me than them. But this was really important. So charity and voluntary, insurance and pensions, and business consulting were the three areas where this indexed most highly. But again, this is really around making sure that as managers and employers, then we understand that what happens outside work, particularly where family is concerned, is incredibly important to people. And finally, being able to work from home if you need to. So, again, it does what it says on the tin. This is around people being able to take their work home and be a bit more flexible. Recruitment and HR, science and pharmaceuticals, and publishing and journalism are the top three. The second one is an interesting one, because unless you have a lab at home, it might be difficult if you're working for a pharmaceutical company, potentially, depending on the nature of your job, to take some of that work home. But that's assuming we're just talking about in-lab work. And we've got to be bearing in mind that these organisations in these spaces will have a whole vast range of different roles within that business, which potentially could be work from home. But I think that kind of changing nature of work is something which is really important to this group. And some other bits and bobs around the office. Free tea and coffee, a nice view from the window, a quiet workspace, a chair which is measured to you, so a nice ergonomically designed chair which is comfortable, being allowed to go to work in jeans, gym membership, and free fruit. Now, we have the last one at read.co.uk, and the day that the free fruit doesn't arrive is the day that anarchy happens, okay? So we know the value of free fruit. But again, some of these are expensive. Some of these, getting an ergonomically designed chair for everyone might not be that easy. But again, some of these things, you'd be surprised, or I'm sure we all would, in terms of if you introduce one of these things, the impact that it could have on motivation and engagement within the workplace. So I think these are things that we should all be continually thinking about in terms of making the working environment more fun and engaging. Okay, so then we ask people about what they value in terms of employer brands. So this is, if you were looking for a job or where you're currently working, what do you think is important in terms of the brands that you're going to work for? 49% said a brand with strong ethics. And one thing that's really important to note, the age group that this resonated most highly with by quite a distance is that young demographic, 16 to 24. This was incredibly important to them. So brands with strong ethics was really, really important. And I guess there's a couple of examples here that I just wanted to pull out where we've seen this kind of ethical discourse coming out into a product sense. So this is an advert for Kenco coffee. But this is Kenco who are selling their product. This isn't an employment ad. This is Kenco selling instant coffee, for example. But their whole ethos around this campaign is about they are working with local communities to reduce the number of young people who become members of gangs. And this is actually, rather than entering a gang, it's actually working hard and becoming a kind of a really useful, meaningful member of society, doing something good for your local community. So again, this is an advert that sells coffee, but actually there's a really interesting alignment between their kind of product brand and their employment brand here. Because actually people who are coffee drinkers might really like the fact that Kenco are doing this particular campaign. And then Kenco will use this information as part of their employee engagement piece to make sure they get people with similar ethics coming to work for that organisation. So that was an interesting one. The other is Tom's, who are a footwear manufacturer. And this is part of their recruitment campaign, so join the movement. Now, I don't know whether many people know much about Tom's, but Tom's have a campaign that they call 1 for 1. So the 1 for 1 idea is that for every pair of shoes they sell, they will provide a pair of shoes for a child in an undeveloped country. So they've provided 60 million children with a pair of shoes that they would not otherwise potentially have. And again, they use that kind of ethical, we are giving back to our communities piece at the heart of their recruitment campaigns. They're also doing other things around, they're launching eyewear, they're providing funds to help reduce infant blindness in certain countries. There's lots of other campaigns they're doing, which is really, they're actively saying we are giving back to our local communities. I think it's a really interesting piece. And finally, Stagecoach. It's slightly different, but Stagecoach actively had campaigns to recruit for female drivers. They recognised they were underrepresented. And they had, with this Women Behind the Wheel campaign, which won a recruitment advertising award in January this year. But again, it's a campaign which is saying, we know we need more women to work for our organisation to drive our coaches. So let's go out there and get them. And actually, having been at the awards and spoken to a few people, this seemed to be a campaign that lots and lots of people took something from and really liked. But I think it's really interesting to see something being pushed out there into the ether like this. So another one was about 29% saying they wanted to work for a brand that was known in helping their local community. Hampshire County Council is an example. This is a social worker. This lady's name is Joan. Joan is a social worker, and if you go onto their website and look at her videos, she's talking very much about the fact that she commutes from London down to Hampshire every day because she loves working with local communities. She loves knowing that she's giving something back. And part of their recruitment ethos is very much around, we want people here who understand our local communities, who will give something back and be a valuable member of society. Another one is Deloitte. So this was a campaign which Deloitte work with local schools in Newcastle, for example, but schools with, they're working particularly with classes or rooms with children with learning difficulties. Because, Deloitte is obviously a well-known brand, but what they're trying to do is to invest, or their people investing their time in local communities to help people learn in this particular instance. And there's a number of examples that Deloitte are doing here. But again, really interesting that they're using that in their recruitment campaigns to say these are the reasons why you should come and work for us, because we give back. Okay, so a last few stats. So the dream job equation. So our surveyists, people we surveyed, said that their ideal job, their dream job, is 4 days a week, £61,000 a year. The ideal working day, 9 till 4, and 5 days a month working from home. Okay, that's what they said would be the makeup of their dream job. It would also be only 12 minutes walk from their home. Okay. They said, the majority of them said that they would love to work abroad, so their dream job might be to working abroad. Now, we'd have to bear in mind that we did ask this when it was slightly colder than it is now. So people thinking of sunny climes abroad might be the reason why they said this. The perfect team between 5 and 10 people, so they said that there's something about working in a relatively small team, people that you know, people that you get on with, people that you trust potentially. And 32 days of annual leave a year, please. So that's what they said with their dream job equation. So, in summary, there's lots of simple and in some instances uncostly ways to nurture happiness and engagement. Mostly, I don't know what you thought about the dream job equation, but most people are reasonably reasonable. They're not asking for millions of pounds a year. But lots of us spend a lot of time at work. So it's really important that we foster an environment that people are engaged, enthused, and happy about. This ethics and corporate social responsibility and doing good are really important. As I say, really, really resonated extremely highly with that younger audience. So I can't labour that point enough. And finally, flexibility and recognising the importance of work-life balance is crucial. So hopefully there's some things there that we can all take back. Thank you. I'm not sure whether there's time for questions.